What happens when Hollywood's most beloved underdog meets a talk show host determined to tear him down? In just 31 seconds, Jimmy Kimmel would push Sylvester Stallone too far, triggering an explosive confrontation that would shock millions of viewers and expose the dark side of late-night television. The studio lights were blazing hot that Tuesday evening as Sylvester Stallone walked onto the Jimmy Kimmel Live set. The crowd erupted in applause, chanting his name like he was stepping into the boxing ring one more time. Stallone, dressed in a sharp black suit, waved to his fans with that signature crooked smile that had made him America's sweetheart for decades. But Jimmy Kimmel had other plans. As Stallone settled into the guest chair, adjusting his jacket and nodding to the enthusiastic audience, Kimmel shuffled through his note cards with an unsettling smirk. The host had been planning this moment for weeks, and tonight, he was ready to strike. "Sylvester Stallone, everybody," Kimmel announced, his voice dripping with false enthusiasm. The audience cheered louder, completely unaware of what was about to unfold. Stallone leaned back in his chair, relaxed and genuinely happy to be there. "Jimmy, thanks for having me on the show. Always a pleasure, you know." Kimmel's eyes narrowed slightly, but he maintained his practiced television smile. "Oh, the pleasure's all mine, Sly. Really. I've been looking forward to this conversation for a very long time." There was something in Kimmel's tone that made Stallone's expression shift slightly. The actor had been doing interviews for 50 years. He could sense when something was off. So, Kimmel continued, leaning forward like a predator sizing up its prey. "Let's talk about your latest movie. Another Rocky sequel, right? I mean, how many times can you basically make the same film and expect people to keep paying for it?" The audience fell silent. This wasn't the usual playful ribbing that happened on talk shows. This felt different, meaner. Stallone's jaw tightened, but he kept his composure. "Well, Jimmy, each Rocky film tells a different story. They're about heart, about never giving up, about milking a franchise until it's completely dead," Kimmel interrupted, his fake smile never wavering. "I mean, come on, Sly. You've been playing the same character for what, 40 years now? Don't you think it's time to hang up the gloves?" The studio audience shifted uncomfortably in their seats. This wasn't the Jimmy Kimmel they were used to seeing. Where was the lighthearted banter? Where were the funny questions about childhood or embarrassing stories? Stallone's face hardened. "Listen, Jimmy, I don't know what this is about, but..." "Oh, I'll tell you what this is about," Kimmel shot back, his voice rising slightly. "This is about an actor who peaked in 1976 and has been desperately trying to recapture that magic ever since. This is about someone who thinks punching a side of beef makes good cinema." The audience gasped. Several people in the front row looked genuinely shocked. This wasn't entertainment anymore. This was an ambush. Stallone stood up slightly in his chair, his famous temper beginning to flare. "Now wait just a minute." But Kimmel wasn't done. He was just getting started. "Sit down, Sly," Kimmel said with mock concern. "We're not finished here. I've got so many more questions about your illustrious career of playing the same character over and over again." The camera operators glanced at each other nervously. The show's producers in the control room were frantically whispering into their headsets. This was not going according to script. Stallone's hands clenched into fists, but he forced himself to remain seated. "Jimmy, I came here as your guest. I thought we were going to have a nice conversation, maybe talk about my new project, share some laughs with your audience." "Oh, we're definitely sharing something with the audience," Kimmel replied coldly. "We're showing them what happens when Hollywood nostalgia gets completely out of control." The tension in the studio was thick enough to cut with a knife. Audience members were looking around at each other, unsure if this was some kind of elaborate joke or if they were witnessing something genuinely ugly. Stallone's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. "What is your problem with me, Jimmy?" Kimmel leaned back in his chair, savoring the moment. My problem is that you represent everything that's wrong with Hollywood. You take one good idea and beat it to death for profit. You're a one-trick pony who somehow convinced the world he was a real actor." The words hit Stallone like physical blows. His face flushed red, and his breathing became heavy. This wasn't just professional criticism. This was personal. "You don't know what you're talking about," Stallone said through gritted teeth. "You sit behind this desk every night making jokes about people who actually go out there and take risks, who put themselves on the line to entertain people." "Take risks?" Kimmel laughed bitterly. "What risks? You've been playing it safe for decades, Sly. Same character, same story, same disappointing box office returns." The audience was now completely silent. Even the band members looked uncomfortable. This had crossed every line of professional courtesy and basic human decency. Stallone's voice began to shake with rage. "I've worked my entire life to get where I am. I wrote Rocky when I was broke. when nobody believed in me. I fought for that role when every studio executive told me I wasn't leading man material. And look how that turned out, Kimmel sneered. One decent movie followed by decades of desperate attempts to recreate it. Face it, Sly, you're a has-been clinging to past glory. That was the breaking point. Stallone shot up from his chair like a rocket, his massive frame towering over the desk. The studio lights caught the fury blazing in his eyes as 40 years of Hollywood battles came flooding back. Has been? Stallone roared, his voice echoing through the stunned studio. You want to talk about has-beens, Jimmy? Let's talk about a talk show host who thinks tearing down legends makes him relevant? The audience collectively held its breath. Security guards positioned around the studio tensed, unsure whether to intervene or let this television train wreck continue rolling. Kimmel, for the first time since the interview began, looked genuinely rattled, but his ego wouldn't let him back down now. Oh, did I strike a nerve, Sly? Truth hurts, doesn't it? Truth? Stallone's laugh was harsh and bitter. You wouldn't know truth if it punched you in the face. You sit in your little bubble making fun of people who actually create things, who actually inspire people. The camera operators were getting the shots of their lives, zooming in on Stallone's flushed face, then cutting to Kimmel's increasingly pale complexion. The control room was in chaos, with producers screaming conflicting orders about whether to cut to commercial or keep rolling. Kimmel tried to regain control, his voice cracking slightly. Inspire people? With what, Sly? More movies about punching things really hard? You know what inspires people? Stallone shot back, pointing an accusatory finger at the host. Stories about never giving up. Stories about fighting against impossible odds. Stories about ordinary people doing extraordinary things. What do you inspire, Jimmy? What do you create besides cheap laughs at other people's expense? The audience was completely mesmerized now. This wasn't just a celebrity meltdown. This was raw, unfiltered emotion from someone who had clearly been pushed beyond his breaking point. Kimmel's hands were visibly shaking as he shuffled his note cards. I create entertainment, just like you do. The difference is, I don't pretend it's high art. High art? Stallone's voice cracked with emotion. I never claimed to make high art. I make movies for working people, for dreamers, for anyone who's ever been told they weren't good enough. And you know what? Those movies matter to people. The passion in Stallone's voice was undeniable. Even the cynical crew members found themselves moved by his words. But Kimmel wasn't done twisting the knife. Matter to people? Is that what you tell yourself when you're cashing those sequel checks? That you're doing it for the people? Stallone's face turned an even deeper shade of red. You have no idea what you're talking about. Do you know how many letters I get from people telling me Rocky helped them through tough times? Do you know how many kids told me they started boxing because of those movies? How many people said Adrian's death scene helped them deal with losing someone they loved? The emotion in Stallone's voice was so genuine, so heartfelt, that several audience members began tearing up. This was a side of the action star they'd never seen before. Kimmel, sensing he was losing the room, doubled down on his cruelty. Oh, spare me the sob story. Sly, you're a millionaire many times over because you figured out how to package the same underdog story and sell it over and over again. Package it? Stallone's voice broke completely now. Those stories come from my heart. Every punch Rocky throws, every time he gets back up, that's me. That's my life. I was a nobody from Philadelphia who got one shot and refused to waste it. The studio was dead silent except for Stallone's heavy breathing. Even the hardened camera operators were wiping their eyes. But Kimmel's jealousy and resentment had taken complete control now. One shot that you've been milking for 5 decades. Come on, Sly. When are you going to admit that you're just a guy who got lucky once? That was the final straw. Stallone slammed both hands down on Kimmel's desk so hard that the host's coffee mug jumped and spilled across his note cards. The sound echoed through the studio like a gunshot. Lucky? Stallone screamed, his face now inches from Kimmel's. Lucky? Do you know what lucky is, Jimmy? Lucky is being born with a silver spoon in a network television show. Lucky is never having to worry about where your next meal comes from. Lucky is never having casting directors tell you that you talk funny, that you look weird, that you'll never make it. Kimmel had shrunk back in his chair, suddenly looking very small and very scared. The tables had completely turned. I wasn't lucky, Stallone continued, his voice now a controlled roar that filled every corner of the studio. I was desperate. I was hungry. I sold my dog to pay rent. I slept in bus stations. I got rejected for every role I ever auditioned for until I wrote one for myself. The audience was completely captivated. This wasn't just an argument anymore. This was a masterclass in resilience and determination from someone who had lived it. Kimmel tried one last desperate attempt to regain control. Okay, Sly, maybe we should. No, Stallone cut him off. You wanted to do this on television, in front of all these people, so let's finish it. You want to tear me down? Fine, but don't you dare sit there and call my life's work a joke. The security guards started moving closer, but Stallone noticed and held up a warning hand. I'm not going to hurt anyone, but I'm also not going to sit here and let this man destroy everything I've worked for just because he's having a bad day. Kimmel's voice was now barely a whisper. Sly, I think maybe we got off on the wrong foot here. Wrong foot? Stallone's laugh was cold as ice. Jimmy, you didn't just get off on the wrong foot. You jumped off a cliff, and you took your show's reputation with you. The studio felt like a boxing ring in the final round, with Stallone standing victorious over his opponent. But he wasn't finished yet. Not by a long shot. You know what your problem is, Jimmy? Stallone said, his voice now calm but filled with devastating authority. You've never created anything that mattered. You've never put your heart and soul into something, only to have people like you tear it apart for cheap laughs. Kimmel opened his mouth to respond, but no words came out. For the first time in his career, the quick-witted host was completely speechless. You want to know why Rocky resonates with people? Stallone continued, pacing slowly in front of the desk like a professor delivering a lecture. Because everybody feels like an underdog sometimes. Everybody knows what it's like to be counted out, to have people tell them they're not good enough. The audience was hanging on every word. This had transformed from a celebrity feud into something profound and deeply moving. But instead of building people up, Stallone said, his eyes never leaving Kimmel's face, you tear them down. Instead of celebrating dreams, you mock them. Instead of inspiring hope, you spread cynicism. Kimmel finally found his voice, but it came out as a pathetic whisper. Sly, look, maybe I came on a little strong tonight. A little strong? Stallone's eyebrows shot up in disbelief. Jimmy, you ambushed me on national television. You attacked not just me, but everything I stand for, everything I've worked for, everything I believe in. The host was sweating now, his carefully styled hair beginning to wilt under the studio lights. I was just trying to ask some tough questions. Tough questions? Stallone shook his head in disgust. There's a difference between tough questions and character assassination, Jimmy. A real interviewer would ask about my process, my inspiration, my challenges. You just wanted to destroy me for entertainment. The audience began to murmur in agreement. They could see clearly now what had really happened here. This wasn't journalism. This was a hit job. Kimmel tried desperately to salvage something from this disaster. Come on, Sly, you have to admit, some of your later movies weren't exactly. Stop, Stallone said firmly, holding up his hand. Just stop. You've already shown everyone who you really are tonight. Don't make it worse. The silence stretched out like a taut wire ready to snap. Even the band had stopped pretending to look busy with their instruments. You want to know something, Jimmy? Stallone said, his voice now filled with genuine sadness. I actually liked you. I thought you were funny. I thought you cared about your guests. I was looking forward to coming on your show tonight. Kimmel's face crumpled slightly. For just a moment, the mask slipped completely, and everyone could see the insecure, bitter man underneath. But what you did tonight, Stallone continued, what you tried to do to me, that says everything about your character and nothing about mine. The audience erupted in spontaneous applause. They couldn't help themselves. This wasn't just a celebrity defending himself anymore. This was a man standing up for his dignity, his life's work, and his values. Kimmel looked around at his own audience applauding against him. His face went white as he realized the magnitude of what he had done. Sly, please, he said, his voice cracking with desperation. Can we just take a breath here? Maybe start over? Stallone looked at him for a long moment, then slowly shook his head. Jimmy, there's no starting over from this. You showed your true colors tonight, and so did I. He turned to address the audience directly, his voice warm and genuine again. You know what, folks? I came here tonight to talk about a movie, but instead, I got a chance to talk about something more important, about treating people with respect, about building each other up instead of tearing each other down. The audience was completely with him now. They understood they were witnessing something special, something real in a world of manufactured television moments. In my movies, Stallone continued, the good guy always wins because he fights for what's right. Not because he's the strongest, but because he has heart, because he never gives up on his principles. Kimmel made one last desperate attempt to regain control. Sly, we still have 10 more minutes on the show. Can we please just... No, Jimmy, Stallone said firmly. We're done here. I don't perform for bullies, and I don't enable people who get their kicks from hurting others. He began walking toward the edge of the stage, then stopped and turned back one final time. You know what the real tragedy is here, Jimmy? You had a chance tonight to have a real conversation with someone who's lived an extraordinary life. You could have learned something. Your audience could have been inspired. We all could have had some fun together. His voice grew sad but resolute. Instead, you chose cruelty. You chose to try to humiliate a guest who came here in good faith. And in doing that, you didn't just fail me. You failed everyone watching. The studio was so quiet, you could hear a pin drop. Even the crew members had stopped what they were doing to listen. I've been in this business for 50 years, Stallone said, his voice carrying the weight of all that experience. I've been insulted by critics, dismissed by studios, and written off more times than I can count. But I've never, and I mean never, been treated with such disrespect by someone who was supposed to be hosting me as a guest. He looked directly into the main camera, speaking to the millions watching at home, to everyone out there who has a dream, who's been told they're not good enough, who's facing impossible odds. Don't let anyone steal your hope. Don't let the cynics win. Keep fighting. Keep believing. Keep getting back up. Then he turned back to Kimmel one last time. And Jimmy, maybe think about what kind of person you want to be. Because tonight, you showed the world exactly who you are. With that, Sylvester Stallone walked off the Jimmy Kimmel Live stage, leaving behind a stunned host, a mesmerized audience, and television history. The cameras kept rolling as Kimmel sat alone at his desk, surrounded by spilled coffee and scattered note cards, trying to figure out how his carefully planned ambush had turned into his own public humiliation. But Stallone was already gone, walking tall through the studio corridors with the same quiet dignity that had made Rocky Balboa a hero to millions around the world.